I've spoken about Sanji and Conquerors Haki too many times on this channel recently, and I told myself, chill, you gotta give it a break on these topics. These people are gonna label me a biased Sanji fan who just glazes him whenever I make a video in relation with another character and Sanji. But then I asked myself, do I really give a fuck if it's my goddamn favorite character? And people love when I speak on him, and I love to talk about Sanji as well. So, we ball. Alright, so this video is a follow-up to why Sanji doesn't need Conquerors Haki. As I promised, I drop a video on why Sanji can have Conquerors Haki, and it would make complete sense. Before we advance any further, a lot of you guys listened in the last video, so let's try it again. Subscribe to the channel and like the video, I would appreciate it, especially returning viewers. I'm counting on you guys the most. Stop ignoring me. Before we get any further, once again, I'm sorry. Shout out to For Real Danny on Twitter. I didn't know where to begin in this video, but he made a good format, and that format helped me create this video. I want to start this off by saying there's a huge misconception in the community on what it takes to have Conquerors Haki. A large part of the community, and probably you watching this, believe you need to have or showcase kingly ambitions to have Conquerors Haki. When people say you must have kingly ambitions, they are almost always indirectly implying that you have to have some insane dream or goal, like becoming the strongest man or becoming the strongest swordsman. And Sanji, who just wants to find the sea, doesn't have kingly ambitions. Like, this guy's just a cook, he just wants to find the ocean. What a fucking loser, right? That criteria is not consistent enough to solely base someone having Conquerors Haki or not, because there are many outliers of characters that have Conquerors Haki and haven't had dreams that correlate with kingly ambitions. Examples are Katakuri. His life is just about being strong enough to protect his family. Yamato has no real kingly ambitions unless you count her imitating another conqueror her entire life, aka Odin, as kingly ambitions. Whitebeard, who could be considered the strongest character of all time, he didn't have kingly ambitions either. The man's dream was literally just to have a family. While the argument could be made that Katakuri and Whitebeard wanted to be strong enough in order to protect their family, which could technically to some people be regarded as a kingly ambition. Well, if you do say that is a kingly ambition, then you would have to agree those qualities are within Sanji as well, because we know he's one of the main protectors of the Straw Hat crew, and he would give up his life to protect the crew and give up his life protecting Luffy, and we've seen this on multiple occasions. And yes, I would make the argument that Sanji does have the dedication to get stronger so that he could protect the crew and protect Luffy. Essentially what he did in the 2-year time skip, he was put in some of the worst conditions he could be put in, and he still told us that he's doing this for the sake of Luffy. He wants to be strong enough in order to help Luffy and as well protect the crew. There are also characters like Boa and Ace. Now, many people might say Luffy belongs in this group as well, because if you don't know or not, Luffy in chapter 507 said, "I don't want to conquer anything. The man who is the most free is the Pirate King," stating that Luffy's goal and ambition doesn't come from the desire to rule and be on top of all the pirates, but rather the desire to be free. But obviously, Luffy does have other desires, like surpassing the Yonkos, the Admirals, all that stuff, like he said a couple of times in the series. But I want to talk about some attributes of kingly ambitions or qualities of a king that would be a good representation of a conqueror. There's honestly no real criteria to 100% gauge who would have it in the future, but I want to talk about some common ones that do have the most merits and why Sanji has showcased them. So what we do know about Conquerors Haki is that a conqueror has to have extremely strong will. That's the premise of Conquerors Haki. The user has to be strong-willed, and it allows them to exert their wills onto others. So this leads me into why Sanji is one of the most strong-willed characters in One Piece. Sanji has a will that is unbreakable, and when given an ultimatum, he would rather die than live without it. This is things we even seen with other conquerors, more specifically Zoro and Luffy. They've showcased this to the utmost level. Back in Annie's lobby, when Sanji was faced with a female opponent, he will forever uphold his morals, even if it means certain death. Back in Thriller Bark, Sanji, who got turned into a dead zombie soldier and controlled by Moria, his will was so goddamn strong that even in that state, he refused to ever hurt a woman. But his will somehow lived on even when he wasn't even there. This reminds me of when Luffy was unconscious but was still able to use Conquerors Haki, and he was able to glare at Kaido, as he mentioned, while being in an unconscious state, because Luffy's will was just so strong. Speaking of Luffy, Sanji's will was directly compared to Luffy's back in Baratier. Luffy's will, determination, and conviction was showcased to Zeff while he was fighting against Don Krieg. Sanji was compared to Luffy's will by Zeff because in this statement he says, "No matter how many weapons or armor one is equipped with, they are no match for that one special spear that comes from the guts, and that can obviously be tied to your willpower. And him saying that indirectly ties that statement to your willpower, saying that no matter what the odds are, your will to keep fighting can overcome that. And he says right after, he knows a special someone who'd stifle on that spear for no very good reason. Is that the word he said? I don't remember. He said Sanji is on that same type of shit that Luffy's on. We obviously know Luffy is the most strong-willed character in all of One Piece. Another criteria that I think is probably the most credible is having the ability to simply make those around you turn into allies. This ability was mentioned by Mihawk, and I believe this is related to Conquerors Haki, and it's also a quality of a king. Luffy on his journey from Impel Down to save Ace gathered people around him, whether he wanted them to follow him or not. They just came, displaying Luffy's natural disposition to lead. This is also how Luffy got the Grand Fleet to join him. Mihawk also states that it's not a technique or a skill. In other words, it is unique as it's something that cannot be trained. Which, by the way guys, this might blow your mind, which is also stated about Conquerors Haki. We also have Ivankov pretty much confirming this after Luffy unknowingly bursted out in Conquerors Haki to save Ace at his execution. Ivankov here directly links the natural ability to draw people towards you with Conquerors Haki, when she says, of course, as it's obvious that he'd have Conquerors Haki if he's shown the natural ability to draw people towards him. Even though it's not been directly said like it was for Luffy, Sanji has also showcased his ability to make those around him into allies. Here are some examples. Back in Baratie, Gin was swayed by Sanji feeding him, and he says that this is the nicest thing that ever happened to him in his entire life. This action of Sanji resulted in Gin disobeying Don Krieg, who was the person he was the most loyal to. Same with Bon Duval. He was an enemy at one point, and after everything went down, he started calling Sanji Master Blackleg. One of the better examples in Punk Hazard, the G5 group is a goofy group of Marines who are under direct authority, but these Marines decided to follow Sanji like he was their commander after his confrontation with Virgo. In that same arc, Kinemon, who had the worst experience with one of the craziest pirates known as Kaido, who was ruining his homeland and killed his master, so it would make sense that Kinemon doesn't trust pirates. Sanji turned that around though, after he spent part of the arc searching for Kinemon's body while some of the other Straw Hats were saying to ditch Kinemon. This showed Kinemon that he can trust some pirates and not all of them are bad. And then we all know Kinemon is an ally of the Straw Hats. Viola, like Gin, was hostile to Sanji at first, but Sanji turned her into an ally by getting the truth of her situation. Sanji and Pudding, hostile to Sanji at first, and she had an important mission to deceive Sanji to get him assassinated. But Sanji turned into an ally by being himself and asking her who she really wanted to be and who she really was. Despite looking down on him, treating him like lesser, Sanji ended up saving his family. Even though these guys absolutely despise Sanji and hate him, Germa chose to continue helping Sanji, endangering their own lives. They decided to help Sanji and the Straw Pirates fight off Big Mom's fleet. It's safe to say that Sanji has this ability, the same ability that Mihawk says cannot be trained, nor is it a skill, just how Rayleigh described Conquerors Haki. This is also the ability that made it obvious to Ivankov that Luffy should have Conquerors Haki. Mihawk also mentions this is what he would call the most dangerous ability in the ocean, something that Sanji more than likely possesses. Another criteria that could be considered qualities of a king is the majority of the conquerors we've seen in the series showcase leadership qualities, with maybe the exception of Yamato because conquerors are described to be natural born leaders and supreme rulers. But there's also a misconception that Sanji hasn't showcased leadership qualities. I covered this in my last video, what it means to be the Wings of the Pirate King video, but let's go over it again. In Enies lobby, when Sanji acting as a leader gave specific orders to the entire crew before they took down CP9. He briefed them about the situation and assigned the Straw Hats to obtain all the keys to unlock Robin's handcuffs. Sanji, known as the Hunter in this scene, saves Sogeking from being dismantled by Jabra and teaches him a life lesson. In life, there are things you can do and can't do. I'll do what you can't do, which is take Jabra's key, and you go get Robin. If you make it on time, you could definitely save her, instilling motivation in one of his crewmates. In post time skip, more specifically Dressrosa, half of the Straw Hats get separated, with Sanji ended up being the one in charge, and this really gets emphasized when the crew literally becomes the Twirly Hat Pirates. He shows acts of leadership and takes initiative to come up with a plan to counter Big Mom's ship and get away. He then takes the crew to Zou and gets approached by Capone Beige. Sanji, acting as a captain, makes the call and orders Brook to come with him while the rest stay. Later that arc, Sanji sacrifices himself and saves the crew, also something that's inherent with Luffy's character as putting the crew before himself. In Whole Cake Island, Sanji immediately adopts the leadership and responsibility of solving the problems the Straw Hat Pirates faced after making the cake. These type of things are natural to him and no one really questions it. He asks for their situation and they tell him, and then he proceeds to plan to deal with it. Last thing I want to mention about Sanji having Conquerors Haki is that I want to mention the specific panel once again where Rayleigh mentions people who made a name for themselves often possess his ability. I talk about this a lot because it's true. Like, I say this in almost every video at this point, and it's pretty consistent throughout the verse. Even though Sanji won't make a big name like being the world's strongest swordsman or Pirate King or even the strongest marine, he's still the wings of the Pirate King, which means he will fight and cause trouble to some of the toughest enemies in the series, especially if the statement from Sanji holds out and he becomes the most feared enemy of the Marines. No doubt that's worthy of being a big name in One Piece. And if you want to go deeper into it, him being the only person to find the All Blue and being known as the greatest chef that opens up the best restaurant in the world and being known as one of the strongest fighters of all time. To be honest, that's a huge name and you're gonna have to be very clouded up to be that person. I lied, this isn't the last point I wanted to make. The last thing I want to mention is a common interpretation of the Straw Hat Pirates becoming the strongest pirate crew. This is a basic shonen trope and would honestly make the most sense, being this is the strongest generation. These guys are the main characters. They are already confirmed to surpass Roger's crew, but Roger's crew wasn't the strongest in the previous era. It was Rock's. And I believe the Straw Hats will become a more notorious pirate crew. And Rock's had 4 or more conquerors on his crew. For the Straw Hats to only have 2 conquerors would seem kind of strange. I'm not saying this means there has to be more, but if you look at it from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Now, after saying all this, I want to debunk and talk about the reasons that people think he cannot obtain it. And these 3 reasons usually are: he's just a cook, he told Zoro to throw away his dream so he doesn't die, Sanji's gonna get powered up by science, meaning he doesn't need Conquerors Haki. To keep it short, the first one, that shit is just lame. That whole he's just a cook shit is lame, and I thought we left that back in 2020. Sanji tried to beat these allegations when he got introduced by saying, "I'm not just a cook, I'll kick your ass." I mean, I guess people don't care about him saying that. And I guess Law is just a doctor and so happened to take out a Yonko and become a warlord. I don't know, I didn't know doctors were moving like that. No one is limited based on a role or a position that they're labeled as. Them not being labeled as strictly a fighter doesn't make them lesser. It just depends on who the character is. Number 2, to keep it simple, Restless Gambler made a video on this panel. Go check it out. But to sum it up, Sanji as a kid who was obsessed with his dream, in his flashback, we see him telling the chefs all about it. They clown Sanji saying it doesn't exist, but Sanji doesn't give up on his dream. Zeff comes to rob the ship that Sanji was on. Sanji is worried about dying and pulls up on Zeff to fight him, unlike the other chefs trembling in fear. They end up even telling Sanji to stop fighting so that he doesn't die. Sanji gets his ass kicked by Zeff, of course, and he's trying to fight back, but in this moment, which is a very important detail, he mentions his dream of finding the All Blue, showing his grit, determination, and his will to fight back against an infamous pirate for the sake of hoping to achieve his dream in the future, even though in this moment he should have realistically died to Zeff. Later on, when Sanji and Zeff are stranded on the island, we find out Zeff shares the same dream as Sanji, to find the All Blue. But as it was mentioned, he cannot pursue that dream anymore and be a pirate since he gave up his leg so that he can eat it and survive. Zeff is not willing to die pursuing his dream to find the All Blue. That's essentially why Sanji said this to Zoro in this scene. That's why Sanji told Zoro to throw away his ambition if it means dying, because that's exactly what Zeff did. This ideology is not something Sanji was born with. It was something he adopted from Zeff, as we see Kid Sanji fighting off Zeff for the sake of his dream, even if he was going to die. Regardless, Sanji has showcased he's willing to put his life on the line for a greater purpose, for the sake of his captain, and so has Zoro. They both understand in the path that they're currently on, dying is an option if it's for the sake of the Straw Hat goals. Lastly, I do agree that Sanji might only get powered up via science. It makes sense, but I want you guys to remember the last time Sanji got powered up by science, there was Haki involved to make that happen. Now listen to this little theory that makes a ton of sense. When Sanji unlocked it for Jambe, he specified that his body can now withstand more heat due to his exoskeleton and combining it with Ultimate Haki. As we know, how Sanji's flames get really has no ceiling since it's based off his emotion. Sanji needed Ultimate Haki to make his legs more sturdy to increase the heat. So that makes you wonder, how will Sanji get hotter flames in the future? How will he make his legs stronger to withstand the heat? Since he used Ultimate Haki last time, would it make sense sense that he's using advanced Conquerors Haki to strengthen his leg in the future to get hotter flames? It doesn't sound too crazy because we know Conquerors Haki is a crazier and more powerful ability than Armament Haki, and essentially Sanji would be unlocking hotter flames and blue flames, so they kind of go hand in hand. You need the strongest Haki ability to withstand the hottest flames, and if they're black flames, which Conquerors Haki does kind of get portrayed to be the color black, if you mix that with Ifrit Jambe or whatever color flames, you could potentially get black flames with lightning. If you really bring it back full circle, kind of makes this epithet make sense, because we know Sanji is known as Black Leg Sanji.